of the past chair of the Board of Education. He passed away over this last weekend, so I ask everybody to join me in that. Thank you. Okay, for a motion to approve the agenda?
I move that we approve the agenda.
Okay.
All in favor? It's unanimous. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second it.
All in favor? It's unanimous. Okay, first audience of citizens. Is there anyone who'd like to address the board? All right.
It's mostly school employees.
And Mr. Trim. Student rep reports. Who would like to go first?
All right, I will start. So tonight for the seniors is capstone night. I actually presented like not even 20 minutes ago, but it went very
So
well.
proud of you.
It went very well. A lot of seniors were kind of nervous leading up to it, but after it's over and you walk out of the room, you're kind of like, oh, that actually was not that bad. Also, in the past week or so, we have had senior night for boys, girls basketball, and also cheerleading. So that was really nice to acknowledge our seniors that are graduating.
Also last week, we had both a junior and a senior team compete in the M3 Math Challenge. That was last Friday, and it was an all-day, I think it ran 14 hours long. These teams were kind of like isolated themselves, got all prepared, and worked to solve and do a write-up for a real-world math problem. So I had some friends that did it, both me and Olivia talked to some people that did it, and they said it was good, it was rewarding, but 14 hours is a little bit too long for anybody to focus on math. So I think they had lots of snacks to make up for that. And also coming up pretty soon, on March 12th, the Student Senate is hosting a 80s themed spring dance. So we're hopefully looking to get a lot of people out there to have some fun. It's on a Thursday, but we don't have school the next Friday night, so it's another way for us to celebrate and kind of enjoy the start of spring as we go into the rest of the school year.
And then I really quickly just want to bring something up. I see it on the agenda, the coronavirus update, but the student body is really kind of wondering what is going to happen with the Disney trip. And I know there's a lot that's unknown right now, but you know, I just thought I would bring that up.
I think we will be discussing that
We will be.
Okay.
a little bit from now, so thank you. Communication and updates.
That would be me.
That's you.
It's very sensitive tonight. You will see that James Stotler has submitted his letter of resignation, and I guess it is also / retirement, technically, even though he's not retiring. He's retiring from teaching, but he is accepting a job in the business world. And as I noted in my communications to you, at no cost to the Board of Education, I would like you to approve his resignation effective June 30th or at the end of the school year, but to also approve a leave of absence. And that just gives him the opportunity to make his contributions to TRB so that he'll get a full year towards retirement. I think it's, I offered that. I thought that it would be not a problem for you, and hopefully with your approval we could approve that.
You looking for a motion?
No, I think it's on the agenda separately,
Okay.
but this would be the point if you have any questions.
Are we moving his retirement date to the end of June, but there's in fact no pay involved?
No
and
pay.
So,
Yep.
so he
Yep.
just.
So you're accepting his resignation as of June 30th, and you're approving his request for leave through that time period. Okay?
And that would be from April 9th
Yep,
to June 30th.
that's correct.
Would we try to fill that position as soon as possible, or wait till the next school year?
It's underway right now, yep, through our substitute service, and actually online as well. Okay. Any questions about that? And I believe we also have another letter, correct?
There were
Two others.
letters.
Christina Meyer for school nurse, and she will be leaving, I believe, at the end of this week. And we also have Natasha Diston, who I'm grateful that is returning from her leave of absence for child rearing. But no action is necessary for those two pieces, all right?
Okay, superintendent's report.
School security. I noted in my letter to you this past week that we could have some more substantive discussions while in executive session if you preferred. I really wanted to have this in open session to the extent we could, because I anticipated that there would be more parents here. But there aren't a lot of parents here relative to, I don't think, with the concerns of school security. You all are well aware of the fact that we've had multiple school security procedures put in place due to a variety of incidences that occurred in the past few weeks. The one that caused us internally the greatest concern was the after-school hours piece, and that appeared to upset members of our community as well. Like many high schools, the past precedent or the existing policy is that the high school is open. We have a large amount of people coming and going. And I purposefully included in your packet 1 week example of the number of organizations. So the only reason it's there is for you to see how many bodies literally you could figure out by looking at the number of items. How many bodies are coming in and out of this high school literally until 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. I said most high schools. Chris, I know Middletown is an exception, because I think you're locked down.
We have security that now, this has been maybe goes back a year or two,
Okay.
where we have security, because we have 3 or 4, I forget, full-time security guards, in addition to CSOs.
Yeah.
So we now have someone who mans the front desk until I think 4:30.
Okay.
So anybody who's coming in through the main office until 4:30 has to be buzzed in, essentially by, secretary till 3 o'clock, and then
Right.
from I think 3 to 5,
The security.
guard.
Yep.
And then we have a separate entrance for athletic events.
Right.
And performing arts, but it's also a school that's 4 times the
Size of this one. So, as we began to discuss this particular event where a postgraduate or a former student, if you will, came in, had a medical emergency, we had to lock down, we've done our post-incident debriefing, and from that I've really wanted to look more closely at what we could do to create a more secure environment here and in the other schools as well. Because that's one of the challenges that I keep bringing up. If we're going to make these changes here, why is here the only one that we're going to? Yes, it's the largest school, I understand that. Yes, it's the oldest population, but I think we want to consider that there may be other things to be done or the same things to be done in other schools. Simultaneously, we have been networking with Middletown and their security team. We have a number of parents who are part of that team, and so who have an inherent interest in our own security and have been networking with Carl and Eric Judas, who is our security guard, to give us some support and guidance and some directions and some recommendations. This is all very fluid right now, ladies and gentlemen, but I wanted to walk through these pieces with you because they do have budget implications, they do have cost implications, and I want to know how you feel about this. And we as an administrative team sometimes are standing out there without your support or not, and we need to know where you stand so that we can put into place what we need to ensure this security. So let me just walk through these. Stop me at any time if you have questions. So the first section are changes that we have already made or are in the process of making. Okay, question. You have questions?
Could you just say?
We have, so the first section here is the changes that have already made or are in the process of making. And there's a couple of them that are temporary because I really want to know how I feel. So the first two are relatively easy. At a cost of about $15,000 through our Fund 11, we are purchasing fobs for all of our schools for staff, so that the doors do not have to be opened up during either times when teachers are entering the school or when teachers are leaving school. They have complete independence to come in and out of the building. That hasn't been past practice in some of our buildings, and we have been criticized by our police chief for having times where we either have to keep calling, literally I think at Gildersleeve School they had to call the custodian to open the door sometimes if somebody didn't have the key, didn't have a key to the entrance. So I've made the decision that all schools are going to have a fob system for staff. They will be assigned it just like we have here at the high school, which we put into place a year ago. We also have had the repeated recommendation for an emergency notification, what we call a panic button. And that is simply a button in a designated place in each of our schools and now the central office, so that if there is an emergency situation, we just press the button and it automatically alerts our police. All right? Those decisions are made, and we're in the process of executing them. Brownstone has actually done with their fob system, and so I think that actually was one of the situations where we had some support from our Middletown security / parent who recognized that was really a situation where we really could alleviate. So I'm grateful that we've made that change. And now it's consistent. I like the fact that it's going to be consistent in all of our schools. It did not come out of the operational budget, it came out of our Fund 11. We're now experimenting with these next two pieces, if you will, where we're trying to create one single entry point in this building. And now I'm just talking about this building. And you may have noticed that with the high school being open and the middle school being locked, and no entry that way, and signs directing people this way. Concurrently, I have temporarily hired a second shift security guard, if you will. Somebody who is monitoring some days literally the hundreds of kids that are coming in and out. Is it a fail-safe method? No. But it gives us somebody who has some visual connection with and presence here in the school, in this, between the two sides.
But there's no criteria for who comes in or who doesn't come in?
Criteria meaning, no,
Badge
no.
or a name or an ID or anything?
No, I'm looking to my administrative team, particularly Charles, because he's been involved in a lot of these discussions. Right now, no, but we are looking at ways to, if you look down to investigating, we're looking at security platforms that would allow us to identify everybody that comes in, their purpose, they wear a badge that's generated from their license that has their picture, and we will establish protocol that directs them to that particular place. So that is an investigation right now. It's not in place yet. We realize this is only a small piece, Dave, but it does give us some feeling that there is at least somebody walking the halls here monitoring kids and their behavior. Questions up to now?
When you say, second shift, what exactly would the hours be?
So it depends on, the ending hour depends on when the ending event is.
Okay.
So it could mean 6 o'clock,
Right.
it could mean 9:30,
Yeah.
it could mean 10 o'clock. All right? We've had some issues with the balcony at the middle school area, the up above, and the stairwell that balcony leads to, and so we're in the process of restricting that after-school hours. The problem is that it's an emergency exit. There's an emergency exit there, so we can't close it off. We can just put temporary, signs, do not use unless it's emergency, and we have cones there, something that we can't lock the doors because of the emergency exit. At
Can I
this
ask
point,
you back
yeah,
to
please do.
the fob
Yes,
thing?
yeah.
The staff here at the high school, middle school already are fobbing in?
High school,
Yeah.
middle school is gonna be added as part of this plan. Thank you
And then
for
when
asking that question.
When a staff member fobs in, is there only one entrance or are there multiple?
In this building, there are multiple entrances. In the middle school, I believe there's only gonna be one. Carl isn't here, but I think we're only gonna do one, the main door, all right?
Yep.
But in this one, we have 5 or 6 different entrances that they can come in. And their fob is keyed to that entry. Is that correct, Kate?
So they can only use it at one entrance?
I don't know that. I think so, that's the way we did it. But like my fob will open any one, but mine may be keyed differently.
Yeah.
Like the science staff can come into the science wing.
Right.
The tech staff can come in the tech door. The PE staff, well, no, that's not different. Then these doors, the lower door. But I don't know the answer to that specifically, whether or not they're specifically, but they do have, all the high school teachers have one.
Philip,
And
are there-
non-certs.
are there cameras at these doors also?
There are, they're all,
There are buzzers at the ones that are by the side lots here. The back building where there's a teacher parking lot back there.
Mhm.
There are exterior cameras, but they're
Camera.
not the cameras like right at the door that you would buzz in and say.
so that we get a better visual, because they're pretty old. It's pretty hard to distinguish who is or isn't there. And so we're gonna clean that up, and I think we have some grant opportunities for that. All doors should be closed and locked immediately after events. This has been a problem, and we need to rely on our custodians. As soon as the event is over, not as soon as everybody has left the building, as soon as the event is over, locked, you can't come back in again. You go out, you stay out, because what is happening is that people aren't leaving when they should, which is causing custodians to have to stay into overtime hours, so we're tightening up on that. That's part of our, part of the collaboration with Parks and Rec as well, because they're some of the worst offenders. Some of these adults don't want to end their basketball pickup games, but, 9:30 means 9:30, and we gotta move them along.
Along those lines,
Yes.
for each one of these events, is there a designated person responsible for that event? In other words, they should be the ones telling their whoever's, these are the rules.
I think, Dave, generically speaking, I'll go through this. It says there, Swedish Club, Emily Sullivan, Sandy Favalli, who's doing academic support. Musical scenery, you would assume that the music department has a teacher there. So generally speaking, I think that's true, but then we get into the town events,
Well,
I don't know. That would be one I don't know,
Yeah.
whether or
You should
not
probably
there's
think
a.
about having someone, you wanna have after hours, a responsible person has to sign on the dotted line, they have to communicate the rules, and if they violate the rules, they lose their privileges.
We've talked with the Parks Department about, in fact, making sure that somebody from the Parks Department is a designee to stand by the door to monitor entry until everybody's entered and then resumes their role. We haven't finalized that plan yet. So moving on with this document, quickly, we're attending these middle school district safety team meetings. We're involving Parks and Rec in our discussion. We're training custodians. One of the things that we noticed with this particular event, and this wasn't a mistake, if you will, and it's not intended purpose to call out anybody, but in that particular incident where we had the person who was the former school student who came into the building, the custodian actually was the first point of entry, first point of visual contact inside the building, and we want to make sure our custodians know when they know something is wrong, they don't have to go ask for permission. Call 911. Boom. And then we can deal with it. And that, so we learn those things when we go through debriefing, and that was one of the things we picked up in our debriefing process was, wow, we need to make sure our custodians know they have the authority. They don't need to ask permission when something is not right. Portland PD officer will be part of all drills planned or unplanned. This is a request from Eric. This is not this hasn't been happening completely in the past, and so we want to make sure that a PD officer will be part of every single one of our drills or events. So for instance, here's an example. Allison had a fire alarm that was pulled by a student weeks back. The police never responded. The fire department did, but police didn't. Well, we needed police to be there, given the situation, and we want them there to support us as we're working through this. So this is something Eric networked with with our Portland PD, and has changed. And then closer monitoring and restriction of door props. Those of you who have athletes and students who are part of our athletic program, one of our biggest offenders are those door props. And teams go out and work out, and they have no way of getting back in again, or they don't want to wait for their coach to let them back in again. And so we've got to tighten up on that. And so Chris knows that this is an absolute here. There is no more propping of doors in the back or anywhere else in the building. And that, Eric says, is going to be the hardest thing to enforce because it's been happening so much. And then the rest of these folks, and you've read through them, these are things we're investigating. We'd like to separate the middle school and the high school. If we only have a high school event or a series of events at the high school, why should people have access to the middle schools? So it may mean the installation of some door or some electronic gate or some even mechanism. Some of us have had them in our schools where you just close the door and lock it, and we're working with the Portland Fire Department because we got to make sure we don't close off access. And this may be a little bit more expensive because it may mean putting in a doorway in there somewhere with actually 2 doorways, Carl explained to me, so that you can have access if you're in there to get out, but not access to get in on either side. So that's pending. We're researching that. You never get stuck in the middle. No, you can get out. You can't get in.
Right, you can't get back in.
So if you go through.
Oh, okay. But you can't get into high school, so if you leave
Right.
the middle school and you're in that hall, you can't get into the high school?
You can't,
Where do
if you go back in,
Oh, I see what you're saying.
yeah.
there's a situation at Valley View where
We
you
wouldn't,
get
we
into
couldn't
a
be doing,
vestibule.
we couldn't
but
do
you
that.
can't.
So it's,
Yeah.
the doors are set up so
Yeah.
that you can get out, but
Yeah.
you cannot.
Travel between the two buildings.
So actually, what you could do, the middle school door would be locked.
Right.
The high school wouldn't be. And so you
Wouldn't
can get back in now. That's what it is.
Okay.
All right? Looking at restricting, there's some kids that are arriving here as early as 6:15 in the morning.
Oh, Lord.
We have to, we love them to be here. But if they're sitting around unsupervised, that's probably not a good thing. After school closing and locking of fire doors, we've begun to do that. You'll have noticed, you wouldn't notice tonight because we have lots of events going on, but you will have noticed that there are, custodians are now shutting certain fire doors to restrict access that we don't need to. Portland PD, the hiring for all large sporting events. This is a popular item in the community vote. People would really like to see us have a police officer here for our large events like a basketball game. Evidently, it was past practice, and it was eliminated due to budget cuts. So, this is one thing we're looking at. Obviously, and I don't want to go into detail, we're looking at some of our response plans and the use of lockdown and some of our training for how we deal with somebody who comes in who shouldn't be in the building, and that will occur this summer. And right now, it looks like we will adopt Middletown's plan and not this new ALICE training that a lot of you may have heard of. But we want to be able to do exactly what Middletown is doing, because guess who comes to our school in the event of emergency? Middletown Police. So they need to know what our plan is. And so it makes sense that we do network, particularly in this.
Are we gonna have an opportunity to talk about that in more detail in an executive session or?
Yeah, once we know more about it, Sharon? Yes. Yep. And then the other things, there's some security platforms that I mentioned, protocol changes that I've mentioned, radio upgrades, door technology, I talked about that, the cameras at the door. Some training through KERMA, an audit through KERMA. These are all just some things here. One of the things that Jessica brought up at our administrative team meeting was some sort of barrier at the roadway. I mean, we have a primary school with our youngest kids, and unfortunately, some of them can take flight, and they are running pretty quickly at 5 and 6 years old. And High Street is right there.
Yeah.
And so the concern is, could we put some sort of better looking fencing that would prevent them? And so these are all exploration. And I hate to say it, but I'll say it more and more, this is post-Phillip decisions. This will be Charles.
You mean like a fence all along High Street
Well,
or something?
some way to restrict a kid who bolts and and an adult having come caught up to. I mean, it could be.
Well, the problem with a
hedge.
hedge is that you prevent visibility until the kid
That's
pops
right.
out of the hedge.
Right.
If you can see him the whole 50 yards, then.
So it's something that concerns her, so I added it to the list.
Yeah.
All right?
There's no fence around the playground. I've never been to an elementary school that
Yeah.
doesn't have fence around a playground.
We're progressive here.
So that's
Free range.
that's really,
Except for that one zone, yeah.
If we ever need to be accredited by the state for any early childhood, we would need to have a
Yeah.
barrier. That's just common good
Right.
practice.
So it could be sufficient to do something around the playground and not have to put a fence in the front
Yeah,
yard.
just some kind of barrier somewhere.
Yeah.
Kind of keep them contained and safe. And it keeps other things out too. We've had dogs and animals and, if there's a reason why, barriers are important.
So then the other document that is included, I'm not going to read and go into detail, because this is something that I would talk in executive session about, and that is, so in considering new changes with our visitors, and if we do create a new platform, have a new security platform where we can identify people, there are numerous, and Charles and I have seen two in the last couple of weeks. There are numerous platforms now that offer some pretty high-tech solutions to what we do with people and how we notify them and keep them notified. One of the problems with this particular situation that occurred was that it was hard to then notify people what was going on and what section of the building was the problematic area. And there are some new platforms that allows us to isolate, to notify people on real time. This is where the problem area is, stay away from that. If you're not in that area, if you're in that area, get away. If you're in other areas, stay put, So we're exploring that and stay tuned for that.
A lot of schools will number their classrooms and not label them classroom or library or whatever, but use a code, and the codes are given to the police and fire departments. East Half has that on every single room.
And they put it in the window.
And they
Window.
put it's all mounted in the window, and it's not anything that's gonna fade, because I know we had signs that were fading at one point in time.
So questions about that, ladies and gentlemen? Anything that you hear in the community?
As far as open doors go, and when they're jamming the door open so that they can get back in, there are door magnets and things that can be kind of invisible that will alert somebody through a sound or on a camera or on a larger screen. If there's a security screen and there's somebody in the building that's opening doors and closing them, they'll know if there's a door open. I mean, houses have that security system, and I know if there's a window open or I've left the door. So we might think about that for the athletes that are coming through and jamming their doors.
Social media policy work, just so you know, we have invited CABE, Nick Caruso to come and speak to the policy subcommittee on March 17th at 5:30. I just want to let you know, Lauren, particularly you, because you were part of that interested group at the beginning. So if anybody is interested in attending that meeting with him around the social networking, social media policy, just please attend. It'll be here.
You have to notice that.
We always do. Yeah,
Oh,
Meg
okay,
does.
yeah.
Yeah, Meg will
I
notice.
really attend.
Superintendent of Schools transition topics. This list is getting longer by the day. And we got a lot of work to do. There's a lot of stuff here. But I just wanted you to know that we're on. And I wanted you to know that this is a Google Doc, so that we'll be adding things to this. We'll notate when we have accomplished these things, and hopefully by June 30th, we'll be complete. Any questions about them? We better be. Well, I'll be available after.
Sort of unrelated, when are we gonna start interviewing for his replacement?
Ask him that. That's his job.
When are we gonna be Dr. Britton, when are we gonna be interviewing for your replacement?
That's a very good question. The position's posted right now. 51 applicants last I saw. Hoping soon, April.
Thanks for asking me, Dave. I appreciate it. I'd love to do it, seriously, because it's one of my favorite things. Well, one of the agreements that I have with Charles is that those decisions that are forward-looking are his decisions. And those decisions that are, now there's some crossover here, and sometimes he looks at me cross-eyed, or sometimes I look at him cross-eyed, and we'll figure this out in the next 3.5 months. But, he'll be prepared and ready to go.
Yeah, a team in place before July.
All right? Coronavirus update. God, where do I begin? Let me begin with the easiest one. The high school trip remains in place and will remain in place until we have reason to believe that there is a outbreak either at Disneyland, World, thank you, World. Yeah, I asked the question, this is a test that I had this weekend with my family. Who goes to Disney World? And there's a one-word answer to that. Everyone. So, you know, obviously we have to be concerned about where we're bringing our kids. But there's no immediate need for us to cancel this trip. But in my discussions yesterday with the health district and the regional superintendents, this was the question I posed. And the reality is that absent some documented outbreak, either in our area or in that destination area, we will continue the trip. Now, nobody knows where this is going. And nobody knows what the State Department of Education will decide, what the Governor of Connecticut will decide, what the CDC will decide, the NIH will decide, or the President of the United States decide. So those decisions, this decision may be taken out of my hands. But as far as I'm concerned, we're moving forward. Now, we've been working together, Krista and I, with the company to determine whether or not we could extend the opportunity for insurance for those people that may not have opted for that up to now. And so that's we're still in that process with the company and whether or not insurance will be offered or allowed. Kristen, do you have an update?
We are still in the process of determining that at this point. I hope to have a better answer tomorrow.
Okay. The district, so this is a very fluid situation. You all understand that. I rely on Dave Obuzinski for support in this area. I rely on our medical advisor, and I rely on the CDC. We've implemented a communication to the greater community in my letters to you last week, and there will be a follow-up on Friday. We have implemented protocol at each of our nurses' office in dealing with identifying children and the types of illness so that we can have an audit of what's happening. We've identified practices for people coming back into our community from foreign countries. Believe it or not, Portland, we have had that already during this short period. Coronavirus period. We have implemented some strict cleaning protocol. When I walked in, I saw Chris washing off doorknobs. So we've done a lot of the pieces that would be in a plan. So I'm comfortable that, you know, in terms of this stage 1 where there is no identifiable case even in the state of Connecticut, let alone in our community, we don't have to advance any farther in terms of our interventions. Questions?
What if, is there a magic number? What if some parents opt to not let their kids go? Is there a magic number where it doesn't make it viable anymore?
That's a good question. We don't know that. Since there's 160 kids, there would have to be an awful lot of parents who did opt not to send their kids.
The band going, right?
The band and chorus.
Can the band perform without certain
Exactly,
people?
exactly. But I think that they would change their itinerary or change some of the events, if I understand Kristen right. But obviously, we'd look at that. Kristen and I we started talking about this middle of last week. Parents need to know that they have the ability to make that decision. And I think her letter last night was explicit in that. Parents need to make their own decision if they disagree with us moving forward. All right? This is a really big deal for this school community. And it's hundreds of thousands of dollars that's invested into this trip. And I realize the importance of that. And, you know, I want to do everything I can to keep it in place unless I'm advised otherwise. Okay?
One other, I'm just gonna say this
Yep.
out loud, but
Please do.
do we currently make them sign any kind of a waiver for this trip?
waiver for.
Like, that they can go, that we're not liable for certain things?
We have
Oh, yeah.
gas, paperwork, it's all part of the policy.
As a
Essentially.
band parent, there was a lot of stuff that,
Okay.
yeah.
I wasn't sure.
And Dave, it was all updated by the policy
It
committee
was.
last
Yeah,
year.
it was, yeah.
So all of those forms are
Okay.
new. And
I
have
thought the
been
one that
vetted.
wasn't sure, so.
Yeah.
And I can assure you, kids are gonna wanna go. You know, if parents wanna, hold kids back, that's, something they have to decide, but.
Barring roller coasters, I'm in.
You're going?
I am. I'm in. So, he looks at my arm, yeah. Not sure how I'm in, but I'm in. All right, next thing, budget. All of you did receive an email from Dave, however, we're gonna give you the actual document, aren't we? Or did we already? You did already, so why don't you take that out? So that you
My
understand it?
attachment was the actual document with all of it.
Oh, okay, all right. I didn't look.
Sent to me by Brian Cody.
Is that why? I was wondering how you got it. Stephanie, you have the floor.
So basically, I've been going over these numbers in my head at night, so I don't even know why I need this. So basically, from where we went to our 4.46, we
Board of
now,
Ed approved.
Board of Ed approved, we now have to get to Susan's 2.80, which 351,940 is a
It's
pretty
the cut.
large
Let's
number.
just call it 352.
Thank you.
$351,940. Yeah. Last year was 267, so just figure how hard it was to do that.
Well, it was actually more,
Great.
because they took an 87,000 hit to begin with, right? last
It
year?
was 67 first,
67.
Or
and then,
67,
yeah.
67, yeah, so,
and about 200-ish, so it was about
And
To
then-
get to
Yeah.
the zero,
right.
yeah.
so, you have to work.
So, ladies and gentlemen, this is a challenge. This is a lot. And, we want to engage the community in this discussion. There are important decisions. We know how difficult it was last spring in May to arrive at these decisions. I'm going to suggest that we add a meeting next Tuesday, next week. And that Stephanie and I would come prepared with some discussion about what next steps would be. And you can rest assured that Stephanie and I have already begun to look at where the places are that we would cut. None of them are easy. There are some changes that have occurred. Now listen carefully. There are, as there always is, changes that occur from the time that we approve give the budget to you in January, first week of January, and the first week in March. Natural things that have been settled, health insurance numbers that are better, cost reductions in some of our contracted services that may positively or negatively impact the budget. We will be prepared to show you those changes that have occurred since January, and we will be prepared to talk to you about some possible very difficult cuts that would occur in the budget.
How about,
And then I think you need to decide what we're going to present on March 17th. Are we presenting the cuts, or are we standing by the budget? Are you standing by your approved budget, or somewhere in the middle?
You mean at the public hearing?
At the public hearing, yeah. Because typically what we have done in my 5 years is that we have got in line, but this is a bigger cut.
The public hearing, that's the one here in the auditorium?
Correct.
Where-
On the 17th.
17,
It's not the workshop with the.
that's my question, would be, rather than making cuts, what are our B option to how to fight this?
Well, that's
which
just
is-
the option, right, is you go and
That's
say,
the option.
I mean, ultimately, this is the recommended budget for selectwoman.
Right.
It goes to the board of selectmen ultimately, and we would have to make our case to the board of selectmen.
But you'd start, if that were the option, you'd start by making the case to at the hearing next, in 2 weeks on the
They-
17th.
I think you
Case
would.
on the
Yeah.
BOE
I think you
supporter
would.
Facebook page first.
Yes.
That was the only place to
Yes.
start.
Oh,
And
And then we
if
have
people,
judge.
people need to show up at that
Yes.
hearing.
Usually there are no
Yeah.
community.
I
understand
remember
that.
from last
It's-
year.
It's usually Board of
Certainly no one
Selectmen and
there.
Board of Ed.
Yeah.
Wasn't there a number that was floated that over a 5-year period, all we had really gotten every year was like 1.9%?
I wanna be careful what number you put out there, Meg.
I'm
There is
sorry.
I think it's a little bit higher, but
Higher than that.
It
the
was like
average, I
2.1.
think.
I think I did a number, it was
I
like
think
two
you
point
did,
one or
somebody did the
something.
numbers.
But the 5% of the electorate, I think it is, can make can vote
Right.
at that public hearing for something other than what is presented by the, for this proposed budget. That's my understanding.
We
Is
should
it-
understand that better. I don't understand that.
Yep.
Because it's a
I thought that was
public
at a
hearing,
budget
if you
You
have.
sure that's,
No.
is that the public hearing or is that the public, the town meeting?
That's
in
right.
May?
That's the town meeting the week before the
vote.
before the
Yeah.
vote.
That's what I think.
Okay,
Yes.
maybe that's what it is
Yep.
then, yeah.
But
we
we need
can
people
look
to
at
be
the
there.
chart.
But you would wanna start that dialogue if that was
Yes,
the.
we would.
And nobody wants to be contentious here, but we know this is gonna be hard.
It's not about being contentious, but certainly about the
Advocating for
reality
schools.
of, when you have fixed costs of wages and benefits of, I think it was 87 or 88%.
Yeah.
You're really only talking about cutting that other, less than 20% that you need to, and that's all educating kids stuff,
Right.
and that's.
People keep asking me, what, does this mean it will cut our proposed elementary special education program?
Not gonna happen.
Well, we cut our proposed special education programming, and then we're gonna assume a lot of outlays costs.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah, yes.
So, there's a lot that people need to be better educated.
Mhm.
Well, I mean, last year, the first budget, there was like a couple hundred people. Once the word got out, 1,000 people showed up. So I think we need to do that now, not as a vote, but with the budget workshops.
Yes.
Flood that room with citizens, with parents, and tell them that we don't wanna have any cuts. Simple as that.
And this gets, one more thing?
Yeah, go ahead.
This gets to the question when you have the vote on the budget, and I don't know if you can do anything about this, say the budget goes forward, we have to cut to 352,000. We don't think it's a good idea, it goes to referendum, the town doesn't think it's a good idea, but you vote down a budget, they always cut it further.
Yeah, right.
But if you how do we go about putting on for the referendum, that, I think you've been
I
here
asked that
before, is it
question.
over, under, it's like, are you, is it too high, is it too low? Some way that it communicates to the board of selectmen that it's not being voted down because it's too much, it's because
Right.
it's not enough.
They have the option
And-
to add that question potentially to a ballot, but nobody else seemed interested in it. But
Yeah.
I
Well,
think
I-
it would be an interesting question for us as a Board of Education, for sure, to have that information.
Yeah.
I just wanna add something that, this is something that was written by Michael Beccaro from Vernon, who's the town administrator. He's also a Board of Ed member in Ellington. He said, at the heart of every successful community is a well-managed and effective school system, a school system where students are prepared academically and socially, et cetera, et cetera. At the heart of every successful school system, the future health and integrity of a community is forged. And that's what it comes down to. If we're gonna be a sustainable community with a good school system, which we have, we need to make sure that the budget reflects the needs of the students and the academics and the social, emotional needs of our students as well. So I think we need to keep that in mind.
All right, so when do we wanna meet next Tuesday? 7 PM, 6:30? Could we do it a little early or no? No.
6:30
I'm just laughing.
What are we meeting for?
To discuss this.
to discuss
What
the
we're gonna
budget.
present on the 17th.
I'm ready to say, I'm not gonna take any cuts right now.
All right, so I think we need to be a little bit more planful in how we're gonna do it. So, I would suggest we
If
have.
that's the planning session, if that's what we're gonna do.
Suggest we schedule the.
like your idea.
special
However-
meeting.
I like it, David.
I'm on board. You know what, I wouldn't mind, if we meet next Tuesday, I wouldn't mind hearing from you what these cuts would look like.
That's
Because
right.
for me,
Well, I thought that was
that's
the purpose.
additional,
That
that's
would be part
fuel,
of it.
right?
Yeah.
For us to say, this is unacceptable, these potential cuts, this is what it will look like for our district, and this is why we're sticking to what we proposed.
Exactly.
Can we, would you be willing to present to the various PTOs or
I'm already,
already?
yeah, I'm
Okay.
starting to. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So
That's
does
part
it-
of my outreach with some of our PTO presidents was, I know Jen Witchy is involved in two, so I'm gonna go to both the Gildersleeve and the Valley View.
So next Tuesday is the 10th.
Tomorrow night.
Does that work?
Tomorrow night?
Yes.
What's the
March
date?
10th?
March
March
10th,
10th.
that's fine.
Yep.
I agree, it's.
7 o'clock?
7
Want to
o'clock
start
sounds
earlier?
good. I
Is
could
there a
do
little
earlier.
earlier?
Earlier is fine, or we could do 7,
Yeah, I think
6 o'clock.
earlier is better for me,
yeah, 6.
yeah.
Is that awkward for you?
It's okay with me.
You're at 6?
What about you, Chris?
That's fine.
I'm
Yeah.
here.
It's
Chris
around
thinks it's
6.
fine. Yeah, it's great.
Okay.
Six?
Sign me up.
6 is it.
So just to be clear, so we're adding in an extra meeting next week
Yes.
to discuss our strategy for the proposed, I'm not a numbers guy, but $350,000 cut
Yeah.
That's a lot.
from the budget that we proposed.
52,000.
$352,000 cut.
Yeah, that's huge.
All right. I've added 2 items here, the quick items from 2 of our principals. Kate and Allison, who wants to go first? These are just quick notifications.
So I will promise to be quick. Many of you may know, and I want to frame this historically, that it has been a long-standing goal, and I think Olivia was probably a freshman when we first started talking about this, to align the middle school and the high school schedules. And it has been looked at and tossed around and looked at and tossed around in various different sort of configurations since I've been an administrator here. One of the things that we have done this year very successfully is we were able to work as a scheduling committee and set some goals as to what are we looking for in an alignment. And truthfully, what came down to it, what it boiled down to, was that the students at the high school hate the long block. They also don't like the 3-minute passing time, which we got rid of last year, was a big victory for all. And they have said to me in survey data after survey data, we need a little breathing time in our lives. We need to have more than a 3-minute break to run to the bathroom and to drop a pass off to guidance and to do all these things. And what we hear from staff repeatedly over time is to truly be a secondary school and to share, we need to have a common schedule that isn't disrupted every time we have a mentor session or a 2-hour delay or an early dismissal, because it seemed like we had a whole lot of special schedules. And people would say, you know, 1 whole week is never normal. And that was a lot of the comments that we heard. And then really the driving piece of this change and this proposal is everything we know about teaching and learning now is looking at the 42-minute block as being too short. And the sweet spot is really that 60-minute, 55, 65, depending on who you ask, instructional period that allows kids basically to come in, to do an exercise of initiation, to have 2 or 3 learning activities, and then to have some closure. That's in line with our new math program. It's in line with our Readers and Writers Workshop, and it's really in line with best practice. So that's how the committee started. We started with those 3 goals. Personalizing learning for kids, looking at a 60-minute instructional block, and matching up as best we can. So what I am showing you today, and I would like to come back and dive into this in more detail. And I'd like to bring the teacher architects of this, because this is a collaborative effort of middle school and high school teachers, to really talk through what their thinking is. But before, we're gonna send this out to parents for some vetting. This is not a done deal yet. We want people to look at it with a sharp pencil, and we want the kids to look at it, especially the middle schoolers. We've done a lot of survey data with the high school kids. We haven't done as much with the middle schoolers. We want them to take a look. So what I am sending around is, and they look very similar but they're different, is the middle school proposed schedule and the high school. And you're gonna see the Kate Lawson type A color coding that is alive and well. But really, this is sort of the best way we could look to visually depict this. It's essentially an 8-period day with 60-minute instructional blocks. So 5 periods would meet each day.
How is this 8 periods? I'm only seeing 6.
So you're gonna see A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and H, but not every period will meet every day. So if you look at the high schools, all the oranges are A periods, all the Bs are yellow,
Yep.
the Cs are green, the Ds are whatever, the aqua, and so forth. You will also see a dedicated time for both the middle school and the high school around the announcements, which is a staple of our school culture, is to have the student-led announcements. And then you will see something called the high school, and this is designed intentionally to align with the elementary schools, the win block and the lunch. So the win block is the what I need now. That's the opportunity for kids to personalize their learning and to have some flexible scheduling. It may look like extra help. It may look like enrichment. It may look like working on the robot. It may look like participating in a group counseling session. It may look like meeting with a math interventionist. And the idea behind the model is that it will allow kids not only to have what they need, but also to develop those executive planning skills that we really want them to develop. Middle school is going to have a little more structure to it in that their flexible periods will be interspersed throughout the day. They have a need to have a static block that meets every single day to accommodate their ensembles, computer science, PE, and band and chorus. So there's a little bit of a difference in the two schedules around the lunchtime, but that's sort of where it sits right now. So I'm happy to answer any questions you have this evening briefly, but I really would like the opportunity to be invited back to bring the teachers back who are the architects of the schedule so that they can really talk you through the thinking behind it.
We didn't want to give this in a public way without the board seeing it.
Correct.
That's why it's there, but that's why she's extending a more detailed presentation to follow up, because she's just trying to get, she's still trying to vet this, as she said.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So they get 4 minutes between class now.
And they currently do.
And they do.
They
Okay,
do,
good.
they do. That was a big coup
Okay,
of the
working out.
2018-19 school year.
Question about math. I know sometimes they say that certain subjects are better in the morning than the afternoon, so how will that play out in terms of what major classes or like core classes like math and language arts?
That's a good question. You will see when you look at the high school schedule that we have some of the periods clustered in the morning and some of them clustered in the afternoon, and that's to facilitate kids with half-day programs and things of that sort. The reality is that we have so many teachers at the high school teaching so many different grade levels that to book a core content into any particular slot could be a challenge. I'd also say when they get to high school, you've got some kids where math in the morning is the worst thing that could happen to them, and math in the morning is the best thing that could happen to them. So, but I think there would be some targeted flexibility at the middle level if the faculty deemed that was a important place to lock something in.
And I will throw out one more thing. I know the state is going to do a task force to look at start times. California has changed their high school, middle school start times to be later in the morning than elementary. Has that conversation been had with?
Not recently. That was actually one of the very first presentations I did for this board when I was hired,
Yep.
and it was at the beginning of my tenure here, and it was in response to parent questions. I definitely think following the trend in the media, there's more support for that now than there ever was before. And the consensus at the time was that it was kind of an all or nothing statewide decision because of things like extracurricular sports, busing, daycare, school camps, and all of those things. So I think it's still an issue.
Yeah,
I know
it
West
is, it is.
Hartford is looking at it again. They
Yeah.
looked at it
Yep.
previously and didn't go forward.
Yeah.
You're right, it's gotta be, you're in a very large environment.
Well, the education committee is gonna have a task force, so it probably won't happen this year, but it's gonna be a conversation.
That's one of my questions you mentioned, so about, what impact does this have with the busing?
This has zero impact.
Right.
This
You have
is,
enough
the
capacity to
start
pick
and
up.
stop times of the school day are exactly the same. Teaching contract is honored exactly the same. And the number of course slots is available. We're basically taking 42, stretching it to 60, but not doing it as often, essentially. The minutes come down a little bit, I don't know the exact number, over the course of the whole year, but they're higher quality minutes, because you're not spending 7 minutes getting settled and 7 minutes packing up and 4 minutes between each class. Your transition times are tighter, and your need for special schedules is gonna be greatly decreased, because we can use the flexible schedule time for things that we normally have to write a special schedule for. So if we have a guest speaker coming in for the 10th grade, they can come do that during their wind block, rather than having to create a special schedule for them to miss, 9 o'clock in the morning. So we're excited.
So does this eliminate that once a month, 2-hour delay?
Pardon me?
Does this eliminate that once a month?
Nope, it
2-hour
doesn't,
delay?
and we have a 2-hour delay plan, and we have a early dismissal plan, and we have, all of those scenarios.
Scheduling's got to sit.
People get caught up in those minutes pretty quickly, but whatever the decision will be the same. And that's really the critical piece, is that the middle school and the high school are the same.
Yeah.
So that when there is an advisory schedule or there is a 2-hour delay, it doesn't jam up the shared staff that's on either side.
As a small aside, have we ever thought about adding that 2-hour delay at the end of the school day, rather than disrupting all the parents in
Yes,
the
we
morning?
have.
Yes, we have. I was trying to think, are you saying like in early dismissal as opposed to?
Yes.
No, I'm saying make it from today's, school ends at 2:15, have it go 2:15 to 4:15, we build it in the contract, period.
That's different.
No, we haven't done
Yeah,
that.
you gotta pay for that.
Contract.
So is there,
On negotiation.
I think you might have said this, but it's like there's ongoing, like there's research models out there now, but that talk about the 60
We
minute
have
versus
done,
the
over the
42
course
minute.
of time, we have done looking at area schedules, looking at area high schools, looking at area middle schools, and following the curriculum directions from primarily language arts and mathematics, next generation science, and the social studies frameworks.
Right,
The lessons are really, we want kids to go deep,
right.
so we need the time to do
To
that.
do immersive stuff,
And
right.
that's really what it is. And when you get into these really quick 42-minute blocks, you're ending up losing them because it's going too fast. You can't really deep dive into things.
Yeah.
Sound educational planning.
So this would be something, if it goes forward, you'd implement starting in September or
Yes.
August, the end of August.
Yes.
Yeah, that's great. Great colors.
Thank you.
Allison.
So I just wanted to share with you quickly, I'm sure you'll remember a year ago, December, the passing of one of the teachers at Brownstone, Deb Olbrius. And since that time, we've been thinking about how best to honor her memory and her contributions to Portland Public Schools. There's a current junior, am I right, Cody? The junior.
Yes.
Who's starting his capstone project now to work on that project with us. So I've been talking with my PTO, with teachers, and his mom happens to be in the PTO, so that it kind of evolved into an idea to have him do this as his capstone project. So he's working on a fundraiser, which will be a run, and knowing that Deb loved the outdoors and loved running and loved exercise, it will be a run. We're planning to do that on May 2nd. He's looking to raise money that then will be used as a scholarship for a high school senior at Portland Public Schools each year. And it will be given to a student who really embodies those characteristics that she is remembered for. So Cody is working with teachers at my school, with grade 5 teachers and other colleagues of Deb's to identify what those characteristics are. We've reached out to Dave and to her 2 boys who are excited about that opportunity. They plan to participate as well as her extended family. Cody's working on publicizing the event. I want to make sure you knew about it before it started to be publicized. And we've been working with Park and Rec to secure the locations and stuff for it. We plan to use the fields that are adjacent to Brownstone down on Middlesex Avenue. So I wanted to know you to know about it. If you want to put it on your calendar, May 2nd with a rain date of May 3rd. And I'm really appreciative to the staff here at the high school who are working with Cody, and for Cody's time that he's putting into it. He's doing a wonderful job. So, any questions? Thanks.
Thank you. Do you have anything else?
No.
Sure?
It's the longest superintendent's report in the history of my
Okay.
tenure.
Moving on to new business, then we have secondary schools musical instruments.
So in your narrative, I think I gave you the background for this. This is something that Kristen and I have been talking about for ages and ages and ages. And it is also something that Tom and I have been talking about, funding these musical instruments. You know that you have funded occasionally a musical instrument or 2 in the operational budget. But addressing the significant need here continues to be a problem. And so we have a mechanism, a funding mechanism that you have tapped into before with the Ryan Fund, and I'm recommending that the entire set of recommendations here from Kristen and the music department is met and can be met through this fund and still not use the entire fund. And the mission of the fund is well in line with our need here. And so Kristen Novak is here if you have any questions. One of the things I want you to be careful about is the order of importance. That really is, they're all important. And I would like us to fund the entire thing and not necessarily, I don't want you to think that some of these are less important. They're all important. And Kristen and I have said that from the very beginning. This is a need to address the largest program we have in the Portland Secondary School. And so it comes with my strong recommendation. Questions?
I'm curious about repair of the instruments. Is there a contract? Do we work with a company?
Kristen, why don't you step up to the podium, because I'm sure there'll be several questions. For those of you that don't know Kristen Novak.
Hi, I'm Kristen Novak. I'm the Portland High School band teacher, music curriculum specialist.
And
Thank
trip
you.
planner.
Yes. Thank you very much for welcoming me tonight to the board meeting. We do not have a specific contract for repair that's written out, but we do have agreement with Connecticut Valley, the local repair shop here in town. Dave Kosminski has been phenomenal in repairing our instruments and helping us out to the point of a 4 o'clock instrument damage and a concert at 7 o'clock, and making sure that we have something to be able to use, whether it's a loaner or a repair. So we do put money in the budget for repairs, but if we need that, he's sort of our go-to guy because he's right here and he's a local business.
I could just say, I've seen a lot of these instruments up close when we move them around for band trips and whatnot. I mean, clearly there's stuff we need to get additional, get new, and especially the marching band drums.
Right. If you notice, and you look closely at concert band needs, you're going to see a lot of percussion instruments, mallet percussion instruments. That was something that I've been hoping to have since the building was built back in 2007. It was initially part of the building project as a furniture expenditure because they are very expensive and essentially large ticket items. But unfortunately, decisions need to be made, and so they were not purchased at that time. And I cannot tell you the age of the instruments because I've been here 23 years and they were here long before I was. So they are definitely in need. Some of the instruments that are on there we do not own, such as the marimba or a functioning vibraphone, and now with the growth of our program at the younger schools and what we have at the secondary level here, and the desire to have our drummers actually be percussionists, there's the need for the mallet percussion so that they can all participate and play mallet percussion as it's meant to be, and not just on bell kits that they use for practice.
Is this list a bare bones list of what you would like? Is there a larger list of things that you would like? I mean, is there, or?
There's always a larger list.
Or multiple,
That's
or,
not the question.
or multiple, you know, you're asking for one or two and you really need four.
Dr. O'Reilly asked for me to ask for what I need and the amount that I need to cover us for what was going to help our program succeed now and well into the future. So what you see here is really, what we need at the moment. And certainly the full percussion section really will be a fabulous thing. We have hosted festivals in the past, and one of the things that we don't have to offer them is the proper percussion instrument or the best percussion instrument for that performance. So we would have to borrow from other towns, East Hampton or Middletown. So it would be nice to be able to have that option to use our beautiful auditorium and host an ensemble to the fullest extent possible.
Do you need a motion on it? I'll make a motion of the full board that we support this list of musical instruments tonight.
Could I ask another question? I'm sorry, but,
Sure.
so, I'm a music teacher.
I do.
Right? So, knowing how expensive and kind of delicate marimbas and xylophones are, vibraphones, do you have any concern about the safety of the instruments with all of the after-school activities and the usage of the band space? Are they going to be well protected? Does this include cases and covers for them?
It would include the covers and to protect them for storage, certainly. The band room is used after school, and typically we are there for those rehearsals. It's one of the adults, either myself or Sarah Ketterer would be there for that. And certainly something to consider would be locking the instruments up, over the long haul storage that we're here for the summer, so they're not in, if there's a park and rec and people into the band room in the facility.
I don't see it. How many octaves is the marimba? Oh, 3.5.
3.5. Yes. And so we, to look at this, we were conservative in the type of instrument that you can have. You can spend a ton of money on a marimba.
$20,000.
Correct. So we were, respectful of that, and this would what we consider to be an intermediate level and would serve our needs more than
that's
satisfactory.
relatively small, 3.5 octaves.
Correct. Yes.
What about mallets? Does the school provide mallets, or do the students provide mallets?
We typically provide mallets. As you know, they sometimes disappear for whatever reason. You have one or they're mismatched. So we do provide them, and the students that are more serious,
Will have their own.
percussionists will have their own. If they're studying mallet percussion, they'll have their own feel and style that they would like.
Okay.
Yes?
Could you educate me a little bit, because I'm not knowledgeable on this? Do we provide certain instruments and certain students have their own? What's the criteria for us to provide something versus somebody having their own?
Okay, typically, that is a great question. Typically, the larger instruments, the more expensive instruments we provide. You're not going to have somebody, for instance, have a marimba in their house. That's a very large instrument that's on wheels and quite large. A baritone saxophone, for example, is an extraordinarily expensive instrument. $6,000, $7,000, $8,000, and that's a big expense for a family to incur.
That's for a student instrument.
Yeah, for a
also,
student
not
instrument.
for a professional quality.
Correct. So typically those larger instruments, the tuba, the bari sax, bass clarinet, more unusual instruments, we provide for them to use. They are school-owned and the students use those. The more conventional, smaller instruments, trombone, flute, clarinet, they will typically do the rent-to-own. They start that in the fifth grade, and they'll have their own instruments. That being said, there are again instrumentalists that are very serious, and they are going to want their own. And if they're planning on in the future becoming a music teacher, will invest in their own instrument and spend that money to have have their own.
Okay. Curious, I didn't know.
I'd second Meg's motion.
Yeah, sure.
Is that the point that we're at?
Questions, comments?
I think it's great. I think we should support the
Yeah.
program. I think it's important, and this program has just been so impressive through all the years I've been here. And, right from fifth grade on through this, there's been a consistent support for the program, and this is the way to demonstrate that faith we have in it and the commitment.
Thank you, and your commitment to us and our program has been incredible over the years. As I said, been here for 23 years, and the board has been consistently supportive of the music education in this town, and that is greatly appreciated, so thank you.
I think this is all fantastic. My only question is, it has to do with the Ryan Fund itself. This is new to me. I hadn't heard about it before. And so my only question is, I think you referenced in your note to us how much money is in there. Have we used it recently?
We did as I said in my note, for the cafe.
Okay.
We needed to match some of the Gildersleeve money that was being provided
Okay.
for our Portland High School cafe.
But at this point,
Highlander
And we've
Cafe,
talked about
sorry.
it for other things as well, and.
But we've not done it.
We've not done it.
No.
okay.
And
So there'll be after this expense, there'll be a small amount of money remaining in that fund and at this point, the fund is disbanded, the trust was disbanded, and so now
Yes.
this is money that we just keep an eye on and can use it.
Comes under your jurisdiction.
Okay,
We just gain interest on it every year.
great.
And
And-
you, that's why I incled the whole, it's hard to
Yeah,
read,
yeah,
I
I
realize
looked
that.
through it. It
That's
was a
why
little fuzzy.
It specifically says in the highlighted
Yeah.
area that, it now comes under your jurisdiction.
Okay,
And believe me, Tom would not let this out of his sight if he didn't approve this.
Yeah.
So,
Great.
we're,
well, seems like this is a
we're
great
good to
use
go.
of that
We've
money.
been working on him for a while, so.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Ready to vote on the question? All in favor? It's unanimous?
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Go for it, get that PO going. Do we need a larger van for trip?
Can some of the kids come play then here for us?
That would be lovely.
Wouldn't that be so
If
nice?
you come to
Little
the
marimba concert?
all-school band concert, you will.
But I would love to hear a little percussion ensemble. I'm 100% serious. Percussion ensembles are amazing. I would love that. Could you? I love it.
All right.
Next is policy 1240, school volunteers, interns, and other non-employees.
Very, very simple recommendation from the policy subcommittee, just to make our existing policy a little bit more friendly for our volunteers and not requiring them to do this very expensive fingerprinting. So it just requires some very small wording changes. The board did discuss not even bringing this to you because it was such a small change, but they felt very strongly that all changes to policy need to happen.
Well, no, the discussion was not bringing it because it's a modification to the regulation, not to the actual policy, right?
Well, yeah, but look at these together.
Yeah,
Look at it together.
yeah, I get
It's a
that.
policy, so, yeah.
I always look at them both together. Technically speaking, you're right, but also, this board has had jurisdiction over the regulation during my tenure, but you're right.
Who else would have it?
Us, administrative.
Yeah.
Right, the administrator's motion. I make a recommendation to the full board that policy 1240, school volunteers, interns, and other non-employees be passed tonight
Without a second reading?
without a second reading, because it's a word change, basically.
I would second the motion.
It just needs technically, you have to waive the bylaw.
You have to waive the bylaw.
But you did put it in your motion
I did.
to waive the second reading of the policy.
Is there a second?
I think I
Tim
just,
said,
Okay.
Yep, Tim did.
Any other discussion? All in favor? It's unanimous.
Great.
All right. descriptions.
You usually do 2 readings here, and I'm fine with that. We don't need to rush them along. Carl has been working on these for a while, updating them, and then also Meg has been formatting them in a similar manner to all of our other upgrades. This is one of these projects that I've wanted to get done, get all of our job descriptions done. I don't think it will be completed, but I'll pass it off to Charles. But most, you know that you've done a lot of them.
Can I ask a quick question about these job descriptions?
Yep.
A couple of them, the head custodian and maybe the van driver and the custodian job, they include, under qualifications, appropriate moral and character standing acceptable to the board. And that was language that I don't remember reading in any other job descriptions. I was just curious what that vague thing means and whether that opens us up, to trouble in the future. I don't know.
What trouble?
I don't know. It's so vague.
So these are some of our older job descriptions, so I imagine that some of that language has remained in place. But your van driver is somebody that has extensive communication and regular contact with both adults and children.
Sure.
In particular. Where else did you cite it?
What does it say? Where is that?
It was in the positions where they do have contact with children. It's head custodian, van driver, custodian. I think maybe not the carpenter, plumber, electrician.
Right, the head
But-
custodian again would
Yeah.
have that contact with parents much more.
So,
Where does
you
it
don't
say
do
that, though? I'm
background
looking.
checks? It's
Yeah.
course we
in
do.
top qualifications, number 5.
So who determines what the moral
To demonstrate
Appropriate
Standing.
moral,
healthy and physical,
we're looking at head custodian.
oh, I'm looking at the van driver. You said
And
van
that
driver.
too.
It's just the last,
Both
the
too.
last of the qualifications on each of those
Oh,
is.
okay, appropriate moral
Yeah.
and character standing. Acceptable to the board.
You do criminal background checks and
Yeah,
Of
well,
course,
that's
yep.
what, it would
Yeah.
have to be,
stuff not listed here.
that's where you'd find it in criminal background check.
So,
Oh, okay.
I don't know you find a
know.
moral and character standing in a background check.
Which is
Well,
why
depending on
that
criminal
language just
convictions,
feels
you
very
would.
funny to me.
How do you find it and who determines it?
Mhm.
And
Who would be, who would they report to? It's more subjective than you have, I understand that.
Because I feel like especially as a qualification versus something that's actually performance within the job.
I
So
think
how
the-
do you determine
I think
somebody's
the
moral
intent-
quality?
I think the intent is because of the contact.
Sure.
So you could suggest something different.
Should we get a legal review of that to
You
see
could.
if it opens us up to any?
That would make me feel a lot better. Yeah.
I just feel like
That's
you're gonna
carried
find that
over?
out based on the convictions. If you're-
is that carried over from the previous description?
That's what I said, yes, I believe that's what it
Okay, so it should have already been vetted, but,
Well, yeah, no, well, yeah.
That's why we're reading for the first
no,
time.
I mean, if it was in the previous
Oh, it was the previous
description,
description.
Yeah, it's been
at
vetted.
some point been vetted by,
I don't have a problem leaving it in there as it is.
Let's at least answer the question, and if anybody that is questioning this has another alternative, that at least leads us, the ability, as a qualification, to the ability to interact with the public, or the ability to interact with children and the public, general public. I mean, that's a
Yeah.
statement that,
do you usually include that you would do a criminal and DCF or whatever background check in the qualifications?
Not in the job description.
No,
Well, you could say qualifications to be able to pass.
Right.
criminal
Right.
background
Yeah.
check.
Mhm.
Right.
That would be,
Yeah. I mean,
What
what
do you-
you're suggesting, Philip, is language that certainly would feel much more comfortable to me, possess the skills or the ability to interact with children and the public. Like that kind of direction for me makes more sense than the vague appropriate moral and character standing. That feels a little more concrete.
so, that would be a suggestion, and we would want the board to chime in on that. So, but I will do the legal check, and then that is an alternative to this language. Other questions about these?
these are all positions we currently have people
We have.
in.
Correct.
This program, correct.
Was the head custodian, written and approved before in the past?
Yes,
So we had already approved that one.
yes,
You made a change of some sort?
yes. I don't know what changes were made.
Okay.
These were done by Carl and Linda.
Okay.
Typically, we do that, don't we?
Mhm.
But I think I think Meg told me for the most part, we've just moved them,
The format
most of
is,
it.
yeah.
And then in the spirit of Mary Ann Rowe, try to get them consistent
one
and
page.
or to one page. We weren't successful with some of them.
Meg has done a
Thought
great
it
job with
was-
that,
I was
though.
reading these, I thought it-
All right, so,
Any other
All right,
questions?
we'll come back.
Issues? Okay. I have another question, actually. The description for plumber, isn't there a licensing or some type of a trade, qualification required of a plumber?
Probably, yes.
That should be in there, I think. If it's a state certification of some sort, or one of my
I think electricians
son's
are also.
friends, yeah. You know, they,
Electricians also are, just their apprentice or.
I have to note it for the record.
I'm just going to step out for a few minutes.
All right, let me look at it.
Give you a hall pass.
Okay.
both of those.
For both.
Oh, this one
electricians.
says electrical license, E1 or E2.
So check whether or not a plumbing license is necessary
Yeah.
for qualification.
I don't know what it is, what it's called, but I know that, like,
Okay.
kids that go to school for it,
Yep.
they have to work as an apprentice for
Yep.
so many years, all of that,
All right.
yeah.
It's like the third or fourth band.
Okay,
Gildersleeve Grant,
Charles, you're up.
Hello, everyone. So I will be brief, but I just want to give you a quick little bit of background as I introduce the Gildersleeve Grant for you. So over the past couple of years, we've been working hard to implement new policy about data privacy, which is, taking up a considerable amount of time and changed a lot of working conditions around here. But I think we have our arms wrapped around it. So last spring, Philip came to me and gave me a new policy to consider called cybersecurity. So I read it, and as I read it, my eyes just about popped out of my head, and I went, oh my goodness, I'm concerned that there are parts of this policy that we might not be able to implement with fidelity. Specifically, there are parts in it that referenced things like how we would need to be held harmless by our insurance company, and what that would mean if we were subject to a ransomware attack, and we didn't have the insurance coverage on that. So I brought it over and I spoke to Tom Robinson. I shared the policy with him, and his eyes too popped out of his head, because around that time the town of Portland had just experienced a malware attack and was going through the process of data recovery and all kinds of very expensive issues that resulted from that unfortunate incident. So he suggested at that time that we involve some of the attorneys for the town to take a look at that policy. So we shared it with a gentleman named Matthew Curtin, who's with Martha Klein, who works for the town. And he started giving us advice over the summer about how we should write that policy so that it could reflect what we're doing and make sure that if we adopted it, we could implement it effectively and with the level of fidelity that it would need. During that conversation, we also started learning about towns like Hamden Public Schools or Wolcott Public Schools at the time, who had also been crippled by these various ransomware attacks and spyware attacks and others. So we were asking the attorney, how should we make sure that, if we experience something like that, we would have incident response plans and coverage in place so that we could respond to it. And he recommended at that time that we do this cybersecurity audit. I think I mentioned it to you in the past. So we contracted with a firm, and they've put us through, over the past 4 months, an extensive security audit. They've come in and spent hours looking at how we have our networks configured, the training we provide, the policy we provide, and all of our systems and how they're configured. I don't want to go into too much detail clearly we're in public session, and if there were hackers out there listening to this, I wouldn't want to reveal those vulnerabilities. But we have used that assessment and made some very significant changes to how we have our systems configured. So it was a very worthwhile investment of time, and I think it has helped us harden our infrastructure to keep it more secure. Out of that audit, though, came a couple of things that we knew about but were no surprise. One of them is the age of our servers. So our servers are essentially the traffic conductor of the network. The servers that we have now are old. They are still under warranty because we purchased an extended warranty for them, but they are running operating systems that don't have the right patches and don't have the right security configurations on them. So that's a big concern, and it's something that, certainly as we harden our infrastructure, we want to make sure are in place. So what I have for you tonight is a Gildersleeve grant that I would like to bring forward to the committee to ask them for, it's a substantial chunk of change, $59,000 for us to purchase 2 new servers, which I think would, if we got those in place, I think we would all sleep a lot better knowing that those were there. Also in this grant, I've included 2 other items. So the security profile gave us specific things we needed to adjust in the network infrastructure. It also recommended upgrading our servers to a more recent model with a more updated security profile and running more updated systems. But also the key to all of this is having a very well-trained group of users. So also included with this grant are some training that we would like to provide to our technicians and to our teachers, and something called white hat phishing, which is a way to test our systems and make sure that people are, for lack of a better description, clicking on the right things and understanding what it means to think before you click. So white hat phishing would be a way that we could test to make sure that users are using our systems appropriately. So I have here for you tonight, it's a $67,000 request I would love to bring forward to the Gildersleeve Wheeler Foundation and ask them to fund an initiative that will help us upgrade our cybersecurity profile.
They're waiting for it.
Do you need a motion?
Yes.
Yeah, I make a
Yep.
motion that
motion
we,
that we-
go on.
Oh, go ahead, Tim.
I just make a motion that we approve the submission of the Gildersleeve grant for the cybersecurity as
Thank you.
presented tonight.
Second it.
Okay, so second, any other discussion? All in favor?
Thank you.
Unanimous?
Thank you for all the work.
Although Lauren isn't present for the vote.
Right.
So you have to put that, I think, Nancy.
Excuse me?
Lauren wasn't present for the vote.
Thank you.
Gildersleeve Wheeler Education Fund Trustee appointment.
As I stated, we have a willing volunteer with some very significant and needed background to fill some very big shoes. And so Stephanie Tatro has stepped up to that and certainly can fill those shoes. So this will conclude your, every 2-year reappointment of people, so.
So this would be a new appointment.
So this is a new appointment and recommended by Howard Rosenbaum.
Okay,
It's your appointment.
And we need to vote.
Now you need to vote.
I recommend that we, to the full board, that we vote Stephanie Tatro in as the newest Gildersleeve Foundation, let's see, Gildersleeve Wheeler Fund Foundation representative,
Second.
or trustee.
Second.
Are we,
I think you're gonna say, yeah.
Say differently?
No, I think you're fine. Her role will be treasurer, but I don't think, you're just appointing her as a trustee.
Right.
Yep.
Are we required to vouch for her moral character? Is that part of the deal? We're good? We're good?
Wow. Some comedy tonight.
was that a second?
Super Tuesday.
Is that a second?
Pretty excited. We already
was
had
a
a second
second.
over there.
We had
Oh,
a
we did,
second.
okay, sorry about that.
That's okay.
Okay, any other comments, questions?
For the record.
Just
I see
thank
that
you.
Ms.
Yeah,
Tatro
thank you.
is here.
Thank you
for
for your willingness to
It's
step
a
up.
Volunteering.
huge role.
It
It's
is.
a
It is.
huge role.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Too late
He
now.
wasn't telling you the whole
Wait,
thing.
let's
so
take
let's
a vote.
He doesn't
Yeah,
say,
let's
quick vote.
Okay, all in favor? It's unanimous, thank you.
Yes, thank you,
Thanks.
Stephanie.
is the leave of absence request for Mr. Stotler.
I would make a motion to approve the leave of absence request for Mr. Stotler effective April 9th. Is that correct?
I believe so,
Yes.
the end of the school year.
Until the end of the school year.
I'll second.
All in favor? Unanimous?
Okay, you'll let him know? Okay, thank you. Thank you.
1819 Next Generation Accountability Report.
We saved the best to last.
Boy.
In some ways. I made a pivot this year. Typically, I have a PowerPoint presentation where I'll go through each one of these indicators and explain them to you. The administrative team discussed this last week, and we decided that you've been through that PowerPoint several times. Let's get to the data. But we all agreed that that you needed some quick reminders as to what each indicator represented. And so I created a cheat sheet for you. So that was distributed tonight. And I'm going to quickly review that and ask that Charles and any of the administrative team chime in at any point if I'm unable to be as clear and concise as possible. Because this is a lot of data. All right, so I'm going to just quickly go through. Your performance data is 1A through 1F. You see that? There are 3 subject matters: ELA, English Language Arts, Math, and Science. We address all students as a whole, and we address students, high-need students. A reminder, high-need students are those students who are on the free and reduced lunch, who are identified as special education, or who are identified as English language learners. I'm going to pause right there. That's the difference about this. One of the big differences of this instrument, this accountability report, is that they're now taking in our high needs learners, really trying to narrow that discrepancy in achievement, and remains one of our challenges as a district. The next big piece, so let me just one last thing. Those scores are based on scaled scores that are indexed by student and then compiled together as a group. And mathematically, if you ask me to explain that, I can't. But these are scaled, they're generated, we get scaled score reports. And then they're indexed. And you can see that indexed rate on the first chart, which is the whole district, and then you can see it on each subsequent chart as well. The interesting thing about those scaled scores is there's an expectation for growth for every single student in every one of these, in ELA and math, not in science. And so that's one of the new big pieces here is how much are our students growing year to year? Not just composite students who have higher scores, but how much every student has grown in their particular scaled score, So those are the growth rates, if you will. And those are also broken down. And obviously the biggest challenge is for our high need students to meet those identified scale score increases that are identified for every single student. Clear so far? All right. And then we get into maybe a little bit easier. Our progress towards English proficiency. This is the first time this has actually made it to this grid for us. We now have a population of students, a minimum population of students that allows the state to actually put this on our accountability report due to the fact that it's a viable, more reliable number. I think we have 41 kids,
It's up to 44 now.
44 students, English language learners. And I say this, don't make any assumptions about which town these ELL learners live in, because we have plenty of students that are learning English language for the first time that have moved into our own town. All right, so I just want to make that clear.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yes.
You have the numbers for the entire district, but it's not broken down by school? Is that because there are so few that
Yes.
would be
The
identifiable?
populations for each school, but we can be rated as a district.
Got it.
Good question, thank you. The last links is the test that we're giving all of our English language learners, and those results that are generated from this school are then scaled, if you will, for this instrument. And that's how they arrive. We have to report these results to the state. They then transmit those. I'm looking at Dawn, I want to make sure I'm clear here.
Well, the test now is online, done by state.
Okay.
And then so they get all the data. And they're actually, Charlene's in the middle of the testing period, it ends on Friday. And they actually give their scores. Charlene has her scores now, they're the last scores already, so
Okay.
it's quickly reported to the state.
Good. And Charlene is the half-time teacher that we hired. That's who she's referring to. So this is the first year that we've had somebody here that is actually addressing those particular needs. And that position is in the budget for next year. We have chronic absenteeism for all students and high-need students. I think that is self-explanatory. It's 10% or more of the total numbers of days that they have missed, both excused and unexcused. So then we have the college and career readiness pieces, if you will. The numbers of students participating in at least one of the following: AP, dual enrollment, CTE classes, or workplace experience opportunities. The next one is the percentage of students achieving benchmark on one of those instruments, SAT, ACT, AP, or the International Baccalaureate, but we do not give that. But that would be considered if we did. High school graduation is your traditional, your on track to high school graduation is the percentage of ninth graders that complete their freshman year, in their freshman year. 4-year graduation rate is your cohort of kids that actually start and finish in 4 years. Your 6-year cohort rate are your students, your high-need students, who start and finish in 6 years. Okay? And that is because, and that's a nationally normed number, if you will, and a nationally accepted number, if you will, that 6-year graduation rate. We have then post-secondary entrance, the percentage of your graduating class who entered 2-year or 4-year post-secondary institution anytime during the first year after graduation. Physical fitness, those percentage of students passing all 4 of those physical fitness zone standards, which we've been doing forever and ever, but now they're part of this accountability instrument. And then there are arts, the percentage of students 9 through 12 participating in at least one dance, theater, music, or visual arts course. The other indicator that isn't rated is at the bottom of the blue sheet, and that is your participation rate. It's not an indicator, folks, but you will remember last year that it played a very big role, because when each school is ranked as a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they could lose a ranking based on falling into that category, that participation category. So when we talk about parents who are opting their kids out, this is one of those ones that does have a negative impact, or could have a negative impact on the ranking, if you will, of our schools, each of our schools. Middle school last year was one that was a Category 2 school that was lowered a rank because he didn't meet the 95% participation rate in a number of areas. you can see that we have met that this year. Okay? Yeah. So Kate, you're gonna talk about the high school on that particular one? The high needs piece. But this is our district one, sorry. All right, so she did get, yes, you did get dinged on that, that's right, sorry, thanks for clarifying. Good. No, that's good, that's right, you understand it, and that's a lot of data. So, here is our data for the district performance needs. I have invited each of our principals to quickly highlight the specifics of their particular school, the needs of their school, and the direction that they're taking to address their needs. So that's a pivot from last year as well. So each of the principals is here to present. Dawn will talk a little bit about her high needs students, our high needs students. We share them. We certainly do share them. Are there any questions about us as a school district, as an entirety? I will say, you know, there are pieces here that performance pieces, the ELA math and science performance pieces that we obviously want to push and will continue to push. But I will say that you identified this chronic absenteeism as a priority last year, and we've done a good job here. And I would also give credit to Dunn for that, because that number has been elevated by the numbers of students who are now part of our Wheeler Clinic program. And so I think that has had some impact in lowering that chronic absenteeism. That's part of that population of students who are school phobic or have issues attending school. That's how they're addressed. So they're counted here. So, yeah.
The science performance was a pilot last year, was it? Or was this?
No, first year.
It was a first year?
Yep,
Okay.
yep. And, go ahead.
It was supposed to be a pilot. Last year was supposed to be the last year of CAPC.
Right.
They told us in October that.
That wasn't gonna happen?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
It wasn't a pilot,
It was a real test, okay. Thank you.
And then the largest needs, and I know that the principals are gonna talk about that, is the discrepancy between all of our kids and all of our students, and then those high need students. You can see that that's where remains to be a challenge for us to ensure that all of our students are meeting those growth needs. All right, Valley View is quick and easy.
So we don't have state testing, as you know, although it's very important at our level to prepare our students for going over to Gildersleeve and being ready academically. But they do look at chronic absenteeism at Valley View, and that is an area that ever since I've been here, we've been working hard on. We've found two trends. One of them being vacations. There are a lot of vacations during the school year, so we've tried to communicate with parents the importance of planning vacations outside of the school year. We introduced the policy to our parents. I meet with all the kindergartners that are coming in, their parents during registration. We go over the policy, talk about how important it is to be at school and the attendance, setting that foundation. It's in my newsletters. You guys probably read that quite frequently. We send out reminder letters to parents as well. So we just try to get that message out of how important it is, even in, kindergarten, to be there and be present every day. It still remains a challenge. We still have a lot of families taking vacations. The other challenge that we see are sicknesses, illnesses.
So we are trying to also combat that. For many kids, it's their first time around other children, and so they haven't built the immunities yet. So we have our teachers teaching the kids how to wash their hands, like how long you should be washing your hands, how do you wash your hands. The nurse does great communication with our families and sending out, when to keep your child home from school. But we do find when the little ones get sick, it's like a week at a time. It's not just a day or two, and particularly right now. Our custodians also do extra cleaning during these months. So we're trying to help, and I've had many families reach out to me and say, hey, my kid keeps getting sick. What are you guys doing there? And I'll tell them, we're teaching them to hand wash, we're wiping down doorknobs, we're doing a lot to try to prevent it. Those of you who have little kids at home know, the nose wiping and you could be washing your hands every 2 seconds. But that just goes with our education and teaching them how to, cough into their, right here instead on their hands and things like that. So those are 2 areas. We have an attendance committee that we meets regularly, and we talk about students that are at risk and what can we do to help. Our social worker has even went to people's houses. She helped one family the child get onto the bus because the parent was nervous about the whole process of waiting for the bus. And so, we've tried to look at what is the reason the kid is not coming to school. And so we've tried to come up with creative solutions to that. Sometimes it could be just the routine of the morning. We've had some families struggle with that. So we would meet as a team with the family and come up with a checklist or some kind of incentive for the child to actually get ready in the morning to help out the parent. Little things like that. At our level, it's not really a kid cutting school. It's more of a family effort because someone's got to drive them to school. So it is a little bit different than when you get into the older grades. So those are some things that we're looking at. It's still something we're very much working on, trying to figure out, how to create that change and understanding that it's important even in kindergarten. We're setting the foundation there, and some people say, oh, when they get to Gildersleeve, they won't miss school anymore because they don't need to. Well, they really need to be here for the foundation too. So sometimes people come in with the attitude that the lower grades aren't as important as when they get to maybe even middle school where it starts counting for their grades and everything. Any questions about chronic absenteeism at Valley View?
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
All right, Ryan in Gildersleeve.
So for the first time at Gildersleeve, our 3rd graders do take the state assessment, the Smarter Balanced Assessment. So you see, when you look at the amount of data that is in the grids for Valley View versus Gildersleeve and beyond, you notice that it does increase. Philip has already alluded to this, and I'll be general, I won't speak specifically about numbers, but when you look at our overall performance, or the performance of what they call all students, it's to be celebrated. We for the last 3 years consecutively, we've earned 100 of those points, or 100% of those points in English language arts, and almost 100% of them in math. The other half of that, though, is that we are also scored on the high needs population that Philip has mentioned, and that has slightly decreased over the course of the last couple of years. But the more important piece to look at is that gap is widening, and that is where our focus is at Gildersleeve. How can we address the need of those students who are free and reduced lunch, ELL, and special education? So I just wanted to talk about a couple of those things, or a couple of the things that we're doing, and just talking a little bit about our population. So something, a piece to consider, I think it's important, we've been having these conversations already this year. We at Gildersleeve increased from 12 English language learners last year to 21 English language learners this year, which is, a huge increase, and also a need to think about how our instruction needs to change to match those needs. You've been very supportive in hiring the part-time ELL teacher, and that is, as Philip mentioned, in the budget for last year. We've got her on board. She's gotten up to speed really quickly. She's assessing those students and is beginning to see them in small groups and addressing their needs. So that's huge. As you know, we've talked a lot about the Bridges in Mathematics program that we implemented starting last year, and that's been huge as well. I mean, one of our big deficits that starts at Gildersleeve is specifically our growth in math. And prior to last year, the math program that we had was not aligned with the Connecticut standards and the Smarter Balanced Assessment. We saw a slight increase last year, and I know that we're going to see that grow as our teachers become more comfortable with that program, and also as we implement the intervention program that's also Bridges based for our students who are identified as not meeting grade level standards. So that's been a big piece. One of the other things we've realized that we had to do over the last couple of years is that we have a phenomenal reading and writing workshop curriculum. Our math program is very closely aligned now. But even with those pieces in place, the test questions are sometimes formatted in a different way, or there's just a little discrepancy between the two. And I think any district, regardless of what program you choose, what your curriculum is, you have to bridge that gap. Fortunately, the state has put out what they call interim assessment blocks, which are short assessments in math and English language arts that are very closely aligned with the Smarter Balanced Assessment. Now, what we don't want to do is take our curriculum, which we know is robust, we know it's aligned with standards, and jump all the way into this camp over here of teaching to the test. So what we're working on this year at Gildersleeve specifically, with the teams and with Maggie Roberts, one of our ELA consultants, is meshing the two. So giving those assessments to students as they align with our curricular units, and making sure that we're asking the questions in the same way, and giving students the chance to respond to those open-ended questions, or to those. Some of the multiple choice questions are really complicated. They have to evaluate 5 answers and pick 2 or 3 of them. So again, keeping the robust curriculum in place, but also using those interim assessments. Just to give you a couple of statistics, we're fortunate to have a full-time reading specialist and an almost full-time math specialist on staff. Our reading specialist has 19 students that she sees 3 times a week, and she has another 24 students that she sees every single day for at least 20 to 30 minutes. Our math specialist has 21 students that she sees at least 3 times a week, and 17 students that she's seeing at what we call tier 3 or 5 times a week. So we've got great intervention programs now, and we have the people to implement those programs. We're up to 35 special education students specifically with learning disabilities at Gildersleeve right now. It's across 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade. We're fortunate to have 3 special education teachers, but again, it's making sure that we're aligning their interventions to their individualized plans, but also looking at the Smarter Balanced Assessment and figuring out how do we bridge that gap to get them there. So there are a number of pieces that we're working on. When you look at Gildersleeve's report, this year we were a level 4 school. And they identify that as what they call a focus school, and it's specifically for mathematics, and it's because of that discrepancy between our all students group and our high needs students group. So these are the pieces that we've put in place, and they're not new. I mean, a lot of these were in place before I came to Gildersleeve. We've really tightened up intervention. We've got great programs that we've put in place over the last couple of years, and I have to hand it to the teachers there, specifically all teachers really. I mean, it starts as early as Valley View, but we know that our 3rd graders take this test for the first time. Our 4th graders, after they take the test in 3rd grade, that's when the first target is set that they're expected to reach in 4th grade. So I've been, those 2 teams have been working really hard to make sure, again, that they're bridging the gap, and they're doing everything they can do to help students to meet those targets. So I have to hand out those kudos, give those kudos to the teachers at Gildersleeve, because they're working their tails off and they're doing a phenomenal job. So Any
So-
questions for me?
I have
Yeah.
just a couple questions.
Yeah.
On the focus,
Mhm.
it says support level focus. What does that mean?
So what it means is there is that one group that was identified as being in the bottom 10% for the state, which is our students' growth in math. And essentially, it's the discrepancy between all students' growth in math and our high needs group. So because of that, we went from a level 3 to a level 4.
It's a serious rating. I mean,
Yeah.
it's one that we have to consider here, and, you know, Ryan alluded, but only tangentially, and I want to say that he has come up with a plan with his staff, after talking with both Charles and with me, and to address this particular issue, because it isn't a reflection of the hard work that what he references here, and we need to address that
Yeah.
specifically with our high needs kids.
And Sharon, one of the reasons we've been given that designation is because over the course of 3 years, that gap has been widening between those two groups. And after that happens the 3rd year, that's when you're designated as a focus school in a specific area.
So
And it's math.
Math.
what
Yeah.
does it mean? I mean, it
Means
says
we gotta
support,
get ourselves
well,
in
it says
gear.
support level focus.
So we could
what's the
rely on,
support?
we,
From who?
from the state, we
Okay,
could
that's what I-
access some state,
Okay.
supports.
Yeah. And that's something I'm exploring now, and as I learn more about that, I'll certainly,
Okay.
be in touch with the board. I don't know exactly what supports they have to offer at this point. We've been in that stage where we're putting the plan together as a school.
Right.
Yeah.
So, this is by no means offering any excuses, but we must understand that last year was the first year that we put in place a brand-new math program, because we felt like the math program previous to that was a deficit math program. So, it's hard to be able to say this is a true reflection of our kids' performance, and I know that Charles and I have talked a lot about this. We anticipated our scores to be higher because of the math change last year, but we didn't realize last year how difficult the implementation is for that math program. And no matter what district you look at, that Bridges math program is a huge transition for our teachers. And so.
And I think
you know,
it's worth
I think-
noting, I mean, again, Charles and I had this conversation the other day, when you talk about percentages, going from, 90 to 95, or even, 57 to 65, we're only talking about a couple of students. But when you look at our math growth for our students overall, we had 57% of our students meet their growth targets in 17-18, and in 18-19 we had 65%. So even with a new math program, there was an increase of not a huge increase, but we're moving in the right direction there. Any other questions?
I was just, being a focus school,
Yeah.
I expected they'd offer some kind of assistance. I was hopefully it would be
Yeah.
cash, but it's.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping too.
Unlikely
So,
that.
It's
yeah.
unlikely.
I have a feeling it might be grants, but
Yeah,
you
but
get the
it's just,
grant proposal,
anything
but-
that we can get that.
Sure,
we would
sure. Just to
certainly-
provide more small group instruction and intervention to students, I mean, that's
Right.
where you get the bang for your buck,
Right.
so,
Can you
absolutely.
elaborate a little bit on the plan? Is it gonna be like survey of math, or is it going to be, one-on-one, or
Yeah,
extra help after school?
it's all of those things. So it's the intervention that I talked about. It's one of the things we're doing now is those interim assessments that I mentioned. We are very looking at those very closely. So essentially, we're pre-testing students with those. We're identifying the students who are not mastering certain objectives in math, and then we're reteaching. Our math specialist is pulling small groups. Our teachers are pulling small groups throughout the day as they can. I mean, it's all hands on deck, but we're doing it in a very calculated kind of way to say these students have it, these students don't, and they need more intervention.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So a lot of the things that I would talk to you about are similar to what Ryan just talked to you about, so I will just refer to that briefly. So at Brownstone, the performance levels in math and ELA are really pretty similar. They've stayed pretty much the same from year to year since I've been there. The gap between the all students and the high need students' performance levels also remain similar, so those gaps are still there. The concerning thing for me this year is the growth for ELA fell significantly overall for all students, and even more significantly for the high need students. The growth for math also fell significantly with a smaller percentage of point drop for the high need students. The more significant, you can't see this on your paper, but in disaggregating the data further, the bigger drop was in 5th grade, and both Philip and Ryan just talked about that Bridges program. So in my school, 5th grade has the Bridges program, 6th grade has a different program because Bridges is a K-5 program. So where we saw the implementation of that brand new program this last year, we did see that, you know, the growth wasn't the same as what we saw in 6th grade. I think that's because, like they alluded to, it's a difficult program to implement. Our pacing wasn't quite there. You know, the teachers are learning a new program. They're much more confident with it this year. We saw a significant improvement at Brownstone in the chronic absenteeism. So for those high need students, that percentage went down. Overall, though, it went up. And I would echo some of the things that Jess said. Vacations, you know, can really hurt that. It went up by 3% overall. That's, you know, a few kids going on vacation, a few kids getting sick, skews those numbers very quickly. We also had a really big increase in our physical fitness, which I would attribute to some work that the PE and health department has done. And Matt Fox works a lot with the kids on their form in push-ups and kind of working on those skills throughout the entire year before they're tested. In terms of action steps, thanks to Ryan, who brought in Maggie Roberts. Stephen, who is my new reading specialist, has been working with the reading specialist there to develop some units where they're really infusing some aligned questions like the SBAC so that they look similar, so kids are becoming familiar both with the rigor of those questions and also with the format of them. And we're also working as a district to look at infusing more grammar, and that comes not just from feedback from the SBAC, but also from feedback from 7th and 8th grade students who are inheriting our kids and seeing that we need to put more of that into the Readers and Writers Workshop. To echo Ryan, it's a wonderful program, but we're supposed to be looking at what our kids need, and at the moment our kids need more grammar, and they need more exposure to SBAC-aligned questions. I'm also at Brownstone looking at student stamina with regards to the length of the test. So we have been giving the kids the entire ELA test in one block, thinking that, you know, once they get going on it, you know, that then why stop them in the middle of it. But we're thinking about whether or not that's the best way to do it, whether having them read one passage a day might be better in terms of their stamina. I'm talking with my peers, with other principals in the area about how they're breaking up that test. And that will be up to the teachers. So the 6th grade math teachers have already said we want to do it all in one shot. I respect that. They, you know, I want the teachers to have a say in how they think the kids will do on it. And then I will continue to evaluate the alignment between our curriculum-based assessments and the success on the SBAC. So last year, I found that the overall growth in Bridges and Illustrative correlated really closely with SBAC. So they are really good indicators for how the kids were going to do in SBAC, and I think that's going to help us even more this year. But the overall growth and performance level on the SBAC did not correlate well with the FMP assessment, which is one of the curriculum-based assessments that we use. So just continuing to identify what things are good indicators and where we can then identify areas to work on throughout the year.
Great.
Any questions?
Our middle school principal isn't here, but I think those things that have been said prior to, you know, with our elementary principals apply here. I will note, obviously, the absentee rate at the middle school level is of concern, as is the physical fitness test. Now, every one of these tests is given by a different teacher at a different building, and there are those 4 sub-tests, and there may be some inconsistencies there, but Chris knows that these numbers I have identified that concern, because, you know, district-wide, while maybe it was an exception at Brownstone, I do think that there is a need for us to look at the other scores, particularly at the middle school level.
And that's actually one of my takeaways for the high school as well.
Okay.
So in looking at the scores for the high school and in reviewing the scores at the middle school, and taking a look at the areas of greatest concern in student achievement, one of the lenses that we like to always look at the secondary school is looking at curriculum instruction and assessment, and where in, or maybe in all three areas, do some of the problems lay. It is our greatest concern, that achievement gap between our high needs students and our larger cohort. I look at as an issue of multiple factors that impact student performance by adolescence. There are critical elements as we move into middle school and high school that really, and I'm going to echo what Jessica said, begin at Valley View. The achievement gap and the looking at students with needs and seeing themselves as learners and as achievers can be very problematic at the secondary level, and that's something that we're very much committed to change. Some of the changes we've already made with our high needs group is curricular access, and that began a couple of years ago. A good example that I like to give is making sure that by the time students are in 11th grade, they've had access to Algebra 2. That's what's on the SAT. We have pushed the pre-algebra instruction exclusively into the middle school so that students have the opportunity to get to where the test is going to be before they sit for the SAT their junior year. At the high school, there doesn't exist the interim assessment blocks, but one of the changes that we've made over time is the inclusion of the PSAT for all grades. So it's really the parallel to the IABs for the SBAC is the PSAT for the SAT, and students take that in 9, 10, and 11. The other piece of the puzzle is the attendance. One of the changes that we instituted at the high school a couple of years ago was getting rid of the loss of credit policy that is a staple in a lot of public high schools. Which basically said that you get so many absences before you lose credit, and it was really building off of some pretty bad habits that kids had learned in the lower grades. So I'm very appreciative of my elementary colleagues for really working at that building that foundation of regular school attendance. I have very rarely see a high school poor attendance record that became a problem in high school. It's most typically from the very primary grades for, I'm sure, a myriad of reasons.
And research says that.
Yes. But one of the things that was a benefit, and what we're going to continue, is that we're changing the way we teach so that you can't miss 4 weeks of class and still be successful. There needs to be a reason to be here, and that's really the authentic shift in instruction that we're seeing. And I'm gonna harken back to my conversation earlier about the deeper dive, the longer instructional blocks. We want the learning to occur in the classroom. I have lots of teachers who are rethinking the role of homework, the role of just give me my work and I'll do that. And that's not real learning, that's completion. So one of our action steps moving forward is really developing a common understanding of standards-based learning and grading equity. And those are huge, huge, huge topics, but ones that are integral to closing that achievement gap, because you'll have a lot of students in those high-risk groups that either don't see themselves as learners, don't access the instruction, or aren't accessing the curriculum, and we continue to work to close that gap. And then to close, the physical fitness pass rate is of concern at both the middle school and the high school. And that's a conversation really about the curricular revision that's underway with our physical education. When they move to secondary school, the shift becomes very cardio and very much team sports and those types of things. We need to make sure we continue to include things like proper form and strength training, because those are big components of the physical fitness test. And you have to pass all 4. Updates at the high school.
Why aren't there any numbers for growth?
Because there are,
This is based on the SAT.
it's based on the SAT in 11th grade, whereas at the lower grades up to grade 8, they take the SBAC every year.
Oh, okay.
The PSAT is not mandated,
Mhm.
so they don't have that to compare. The PSAT is a district decision.
Is that something you look at internally?
Yes.
Because the PSAT is
Correct.
to every grade?
And one of the nice things that the College Board does is they help benchmark us, so they can show us what a benchmark score in 9th grade will correlate to a benchmark score in 11th grade. And College Board does a really nice job of providing that tool for us with data analysis.
So do you see growth?
We do. Where we continue to see struggles is around the math. And we need to continue to build that capacity. That capacity, because the SAT tests Algebra 2 and Trig. And there's a lot of that on it. So that's what we're working towards.
Those performance tests, those 3, ELA, math, and science, are more heavily weighted because the growth isn't there. So instead of 100 points max, it's 150.
Well, and it's a longer snapshot. You know, you're only testing 11th graders, and you're making a judgment on 9th and 12th. So it's really looking at, you know, how has the curriculum impacted 9, 10, and 11? So it's going to take, I don't want to say take longer to see the shifts, but it's not a full sample. It's not every student being tested.
So she's talked about the needs at the upper end of that, the performance level. I want to just draw your attention to the increases at the lower half. You know, chronic absenteeism, I hate to keep harping on it, but 7.5% to 4.9%.
And our high risk have gone from 15 to 5.
15.7 to 5.6.
Nice work.
So kids are here.
Yeah, we're really happy about it, and I truly credit that to what is happening in the classroom is making the engagement more. I think my high school principal colleague thought I was crazy getting rid of the loss of credit, but with that policy, we were giving kids 4 weeks vacation, essentially, and that just it wasn't working. And it led to no positive outcome. So we want to instill good work habits and good employee habits. So you need to come to school. Thank you.
Is this your first 4-year class as principal?
Yes.
This tested class?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, because this is year 5, so
Yep.
this is last year's data.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right. We'll continue to talk about this.
Yeah, good. Old business. Our superintendent of schools mid-year evaluation, which we will discuss in executive session. So, we'll move on to committee reports, curriculum.
Unfortunately, I was sick and missed the last one.
Okay, policy.
We met tonight and we have, much in front of us, but we're gonna crank through it and we'll have some policies hopefully for first reading in the next, couple of weeks.
Okay, personnel, I don't think there's anything to report. Buildings and grounds.
Thank you,
Nothing. Got nothing. Conservation and Renewable Task Force, there's something coming up, isn't there, a meeting or something? No?
Yeah, Thursday, I
Okay.
believe, yep.
Correct liaison.
I went to the correct breakfast, I went to the correct meeting, I have signed up to do policy at CREC, so that'll give me another level of expertise. Nothing earth-shattering, the Education Committee postponed their, legislative, update, but they're working on a lot of stuff that hopefully will throw some money at us as well, otherwise I don't think anybody wants to see it. And I also attended, the CREC, legislative, no, that was CAPE, sorry, that's different, all right.
Selectmen?
Like a 30-minute
Nothing?
meeting last time.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
Audience of citizens? Okay.
Is that a student?
Crickets.
Is that a student?
Board of Ed member comments.
Phil, can you just clarify, because I spaced out for a sec. Are we having a conservation meeting Thursday? Is that what you said?
It's hard to explain.
Okay.
Susan has a possible, another possible, what do I call it?
Oh, project with the Green Bank people?
No, not with Green
No.
Bank.
Those other
With
people?
another organization, and she didn't want to call a formal meeting
Oh,
yet,
okay.
she just wanted to
Okay.
have some initial discussions about it,
Okay.
so.
Make
I
sure.
think Sharon, you're attending, are you attending? No,
I don't think I can.
I know I'm attending,
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think I can go.
so we don't want to bring, she didn't want to bring it to the full committee until we get some more information.
Okay, any other comments?
I'm wondering if there is a district policy or if there are building policies regarding recess. Whether there's a certain temperature at which the children play outside or don't. As a parent to three, at 3 different schools, they're frequently coming home. This one was indoors, that one was outdoors. And as a parent, I can't really tell if there's a rhyme or reason as to
Did you look
why
at-
they're in.
Did you-
Sometimes it looks pretty nice out and they're inside, so I'm curious.
Is there, did you look in the policy?
There is no district
I think
policy.
there is. Yeah, I didn't think so.
It is a point of, a point that I often make to my principals, that the temperature restrictions are too high, that we need to get kids outside on a sunny, cold day.
Yeah.
Um,
I think it's,
But there
on
is
one
no,
day it was 40
and I feel like
degrees and
I'm
they were
throwing
inside.
them under the bus, but
Yeah.
they're different at every school.
Yes, they are.
They're different at every school. And so if you, as a board, want to ask your policy subcommittee to take a look at that, you can do that, to
We might-
create a standard.
I think if we
When-
don't, we might be hearing from some upset parents that are not happy that their kids aren't getting outside. I've heard this from a number
Yeah,
of people
I do that
personally.
What, are they calling the principal to talk about it?
Some of them have sat down with the principals,
Oh.
yeah.
That's really the
I
first
have
step.
not.
Yeah.
I am an
Yeah, I mean,
upset
it's
parent.
just- it's
I have not
what
sat down with the principal, but to me, there was one day last week when it was 40 degrees and 2 of my 3 children were indoors.
Yep.
And it was windy, but go outside. You know, they would be outside home, so.
It's a judgment call
Yeah.
made at each,
I know.
you can tell,
Yeah.
made at each,
Yep.
Well, the other thing
School.
is that if the playscape at one of the schools is wet or muddy, or that may be why they don't put them out on the playground.
I would like to ask us to look at that as a board.
Is that, if there's a, this may see, will show my length of time since I've had a young child in school, but if they have the outdoor recess, is there an option for kids who don't want to or may not be prepared?
Again, that may change from
Brownstone
school.
has
Well, I just
Well,
think if
I
you
know
have
that
it-
Allison offers some.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
some
maybe you have
options.
like a 40-degree day and it's sunny, but if half the kids didn't come to school
Well,
in
that's the other
clothes
issue.
that are appropriate.
So that's
for
what I'm
the-
wondering too, as a
better.
former teacher, having worked in West Hartford, it was district policy that children needed to have
Yeah.
appropriate weather gear.
When I was a principal, that wasn't our responsibility.
Oh, no, and it shouldn't be our
And
school's
we,
responsibility.
but we had a policy that was written that said, believe it or not, where I was in the northwest corner of Massachusetts, it was 0 degrees or lower, and they were inside.
Yeah.
Wind chill factored in. So if it was 10 degrees and a 20-mile-an-hour wind, they wouldn't go outside, because obviously that's bitter.
That's pretty
But it
reasonable.
was 0 and a beautiful sunny day with no wind,
You're
we were
out.
letting them out.
And
Because
if that's-
we expected that they came to school clothed appropriately.
And if that's the policy, then kids will come to school
And
prepared.
that's right.
But
And-
currently, the expectation is that, oh, it looks like it's gonna sprinkle, so I don't need to bring anything because I'm gonna be inside today.
Right.
That's,
I wouldn't say that that's a problem. I think I think actually if you polled our principals, they would all
Yeah.
say, give us some guidelines here.
Yeah.
Good.
So is
To
that
be honest
something
with
that we can be talking about in the near future?
Well, the policy.
In policy
Well,
committee?
yeah.
Yeah, we'll
I
put it
think
on the
that's
list.
great.
Put, add it to the list.
Put it in there.
I know from just the Kids Corner experience, the kids aren't coming with adequate clothing.
No.
And they have short sleeve shirts, and I had kids all
Yeah.
winter that wore soccer shorts and no leggings underneath. Much of the constraints of their concern of their parents and they finally came to some agreement, but some of the kids don't come with mittens or hats or, you know, coats that have zippers or whatever.
To
So
be
that's-
honest, I don't send my children with gloves or hats because they're inside. Truly, they're inside. Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
would
but you
do
gotta
a
think
favor
about what
and
about
put
if
that
there's
on the
a
agenda
fire
first?
truck or a fire, you're standing outside
This is true.
freezing because
I
it
should be
become-
sending them with.
Yes, you
I
should.
should.
I'm just saying.
So the
In some
last-
ways, I'm not surprised.
So it's one of the things I went to, just as an aside, was, I went to the, CREC chair, board chair meeting with board members and board chairs and whatnot. And around the table, as part of the introductions, the problems or the issues that are facing just about, there were like 15 or 16 districts there. They all have the same problems that we have, you know, aging buildings, sped costs out of control, declining enrollments, although there was one district that also had a boost in kindergarten. The problem with all of those meetings is that there's no solutions necessarily, but there tends to be pockets of information. So CABE is in the process, and if we do anything really well, we should also fill this form out. It's called Spotlight on Schools, and they are in the process of trying to do a database of where things are working really well or where there are solutions. And, you know, we can, in terms of regional information, we're not calling it regionalization now, we're calling it regionalism. I'm not sure what the difference is, but that's a new terminology.
Semantics.
It is semantics, but they are willing to try to create some kind of informational piece for us. And the other thing that came out of it was that CREC is trying to, I guess, all the RESCs. Correct, well, the CRECs, but this came out of the meeting. All the RESCs, which are all the regional educational centers, are trying to put together some kind of a transportation plan, because one of the things about SPED is the out of control special education costs for transportation. And so one of the districts is trying to work with and all of them to, you know, if you've got a bus going here and you've got 6 kids going to this place, you might be able to get one bus to pick up all 6 kids and take them and bring them back. I don't know that will work, but that's a concept that is interesting, and it may result in regional transportation contracts as well. So those are, you know, all things being discussed, but everybody's got the same issues.
Motion to go into executive session?
I make the motion to go into executive session